Big dog, YCS Birmingham completes the tale of two stories. While YCS Orlando painted a tier 0 format, Birmingham showed some really exciting things about the Yu-Gi-Oh card game that can change how you approach it. And today, not only we're going to be talking about those powerful cards and going over some of the strongest decks, we'll also talk about some other interesting and strange things that happen in Europe that also needs to happen in America. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that's your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. I just want to give you guys the heads up. Normally today is Update Monday, but unfortunately I'm gonna have to move Update Monday to Tuesday because I was not expecting to make a video on this particular event, but boy, it was crazy. YCS Birmingham had a whopping 2,496 duelists, which I believe made it bigger than YCS Orlando. If it is, it's not by much, but it had completely different results than what happened in America. You see, there's a few differences between Europe and America when it comes to this card game. In America, players tend to play what's the best deck available and usually don't stray, where in Europe, players are more open to try other strategies and figure other things out to see if they can actually beat the meta. Of course, I'm not talking about every single European or every single American, but I actually think that this stigma is brought onto the community because of what we watch. When we were watching YCS Orlando, I damn near fell asleep.
Wake me up when it was over.
And it's mainly because it was 18 rounds pretty much of Yugioh versus Maliss. Yugioh versus Maliss. Oh, Maliss versus Yugioh. But in Europe, they actually decide to broadcast strategies they don't think are going to make into the top cut. This means that when we actually do get in the top cut with Europe, and it's all Yugioh and Maliss, at least we're not all burned out from watching nothing but Yugioh and Maliss. In my opinion, that has a huge effect on how we view the meta. If you see nothing but the two best decks in the game, then you're only going to think those are the decks are available. So it means that even when a strategy is not one of those decks topping, you think it's more of a fluke. Where in Europe, if a strategy gets high rank or prestige, it's often thought it's because it's all skill. Me personally, I would love it if America did show more diverse strategies, but let me know down below in the comment section, which one would you prefer? Would you prefer to see meta all day, or would you love to see other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies play? But that actually brings us to the notable game-shifting cards that I've seen throughout the tournament. Cards that I think you should be looking at as intently as you look at your waifu. It's not staring back at you, but these cards will definitely help you along the way in your competitive games. Now, of course, a lot of the cards that I talked about from YCS Orlando 100% transferred over, so if you haven't seen that video and wanted to know what were those cards, go ahead and check it out. But some other cards that I've noticed that players have taken a liking to is the Triple Tactics package. Hand traps are being played like crazy this format, and even if the deck isn't using hand traps, oftentimes they're activating monster effects on your turn. Also, seeing that over 75% of Yu-Gi-Oh strategies are playing the Molcharmy cards in their main deck and side deck, the Tactics cards have proven themselves to be invaluable cards in case your opponent wants to try to put you in a situation where you'd have to skip your turn. Now, what I've been seeing for Triple Tactics talent is that players have been using its Draw 2 effect over the Hand Ripped or the Take Control, but it really depends on what deck you're playing. So let me know what's your favorite mode for Triple Tactics talent. Mine is the
Take your bitch.
Triple Tactics Thrust, on the other hand, was being used to search those floodgate cards like Artifact Sanctum to be able to summon out a Lancia or Dimensional Barrier Steel. Bonus points if your strategy plays spell or trap cards that are really important to the deck, like how Maliss can use Triple Tactics Thrust to be able to search any of their Maliss trap cards and then use them banishing their Maliss monsters. Or how you can use Triple Tactics talent to finally get a job and get out of your mother's basement. We both know you're not moving out. Don't move out. I wouldn't if I were you.
Free rent.
Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. You could either buy Molcharmy cards or pay rent. I need the Molcharmy cards to be able to top. I don't need rent to be able to top. I'm just saying. Dominus Impulse was another card that was going crazy. Its abilities to be able to stop summons on demand and destroy the card if you have a trap card is nothing less than amazing. This card was probably the MVP card that I've seen the entire week. And while I didn't see much, I think that Dominance Purge could be that powerful too. It just needs to be played in the correct deck. The last card that I seen, which was incredibly powerful, was Solemn Strike. Now this card was shutting everything down. Really powerful cards like the Molcharmies and Artifact Lancia, all the way down to Link summons Exceed summons, and your opponent's most important plays. At any given time when you know you're going first, Solemn Strike is a really good card to be able to stop your opponent's most important plays. Before I start talking about the topping strategies and everything in between, I do want to note one more thing. In between rounds for YCS Birmingham, Konami leaked one card from Quarter Century Stampede. I think things like this during stream make stream a lot more worth it to watch. And it's just another thing that Europe has quality-wise over America. Until I saw the things that they were confirming. Out of all the cards, the first card was Skull Servant, then Buster Blader, Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon. What are we doing? It does pick up with some other cards that are used in older formats like Royal Oppression, El Shaddai Construct, then it goes back to an alternate art of a Credible Ecclesia. It confirms Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, which is you bought the collector's rares, you're cooked. Runic Fountain, an alternate version of Access Code, ABC Dragon Busters, Alistair the Invoker, Solomon Great Raging Phoenix, Dark Magician, another art, Maxi, Sky Striker Ace Ray, of course, Fallen Albaz, and Phoenix Cluster Amaryllis. To be honest with you guys, these cards are okay. If these are the chase cards for Quarter Century Stampede, then you are being scammed. But hopefully we finally get those Bestials and Cashier cards, like I said, because those are some of the only competitive cards that have not been reprinted inside of a Quarter Century set. Moving on to the top 64, we have 25 Ryziel, 16 Malice, 6 Mitsurugi Ryziel, 5 Mimendo, 4 Tempai Dragon, 2 Fiendsmith Bestial, 2 Atlantean Mermail, 1 White Force, 1 Branded, 1 Fire King, and 1 Chron. While it's still looking Tier 0-esque, players became a lot more prepared for this event than the last event. YCS Orlando was the very first YCS to happen, and of course, a lot of people will pick their best deck available. But what's really interesting here is because Konami in Europe promotes diversity, you get to see a little bit more diverse decks in the top cut. And I actually want to take a look at Kyle Wallace's Chron deck. Now, the crazy thing about Kyle's deck is that there were quite a few people that were saying that this deck can't compete. But a top 64 at a 2,400-man tournament proves that the deck very much can. The theme of triple tactics, thrust, talent, solemn strike, and the floodgate for your thrusts is very much there. And what this deck does so well is that a skilled Chron player can play around hand traps and still establish some pretty powerful boards. Now, I did wait an entire extra day to try to get as many deck profiles as possible, but for some reason, European events are really hard to get any type of profiles from. I'm not 100% sure why that's the case, so if anybody in Europe wants to explain, please let me know. And if for some reason Europeans are just taking their time, hurry the f up, please. Thank you. Now, despite the top 64 having a ton of Ryziel, these Ryziel decks were actually different than the ones we seen in YCS Orlando. For example, there were a lot more pure Ryziel builds being used, and there was also a really interesting Ryziel deck that caught my eye. This is Ben Krutzkamp's Ryziel, technically Traptrix Ryziel deck. I'm not sure how Traptrix players are going to feel about this because it only runs just Traptrix Miramello, but you can see the clear theory behind it is that it is a pure XC deck, using Rafflesia to be able to get into your Gravedigger's Trap Hole, meaning that you're insulated from hand traps, and then later on it can be used for Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare to be able to stop your opponent's monster effects, I think is completely genius. In my opinion, this version of the deck reminds me of Hat format, and to be honest with you, I think that this is one of the more cooler versions to play Ryziel. A genuine Exceed-based Yu-Gi-Oh deck that not only helps other Exceed strategies, but is still fairly powerful on its own. Tempai Dragon is also one of the cheapest decks we know, though this particular version is a little bit more on the expensive side. Alfie Jenkins' Tempai Bestial Fiendsmith deck is the perfect counter to both Malice and Fiendsmith itself, using Branded Regain to be able to shuffle out your opponent's Malice cards, your Bestial monsters to be able to stop the Fiendsmith cards, and your Fiendsmith cards to be able to bait your opponent so you can get your Tempai Dragon combo is probably going to be a standard for what we're going to see when it comes to Tempai Dragon. I still personally think that the Sky Striker variant can top, and hopefully we get those confirmed reprints of those Fiendsmith and Bestial cards soon. I'm not coping at this time. I'm demanding. So this deck can finally be inexpensive to Yu-Gi-Oh players. Now again, I really wish I could show you guys some of the other crazier profiles in here, but unfortunately we don't have them just yet. I'll probably be going over them on stream on Twitch when I can, but until then, there's actually some other cool profiles and some references that we can use to top Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. But in the top 32, we actually have Matthew Collins' Mermail profile, which is pretty huge. In a previous video, we talked about how Exceed Encore was a crazy powerful Yu-Gi-Oh card, and nothing really changes here. I wouldn't say that this is a standard Mermail deck. There are definitely some differences than some of your other typical decks, and then there's some cards that people don't agree with, like super ancient deep sea Coldkens. I'm a believer, but I think in between the last few events, Mermail has proven itself to be a solid contender in the Yu-Gi-Oh format. So if you guys wanted to copy a particular deck list, this one's not a bad one to start at. One thing that I want to point about Maliss, and congratulations to Tom Klinggraber in his Maliss deck, is that the strategy hasn't changed too much. A lot of players are dropping Dotscaper from their deck and their main boarding Ultimate Slayer. They're also no longer playing the Firewall Dragon combo that allows them to be able to send Muriolic Aggregator and stuff to the graveyard. And instead, they are still holding strong. Well, actually, this guy's not even playing it. He's just playing Mech Knight Crusade Avermax. Where am I going? Now, he is still playing the Griffin Lock, but it is going to be a little bit harder to manipulate, seeing that he doesn't have a Bayo Aku in his deck. But I wonder, what is his real thoughts for Mech Knight Crusade Avermax? That's pretty cool. Also, when your only light monsters in your deck are Firewall Dragon, Lancey on the sideboard, Nibiru, Dominus Impulse can be a really crazy card. Now, Solemn Strike, again, is to be able to stop your opponent's important monster effects. This deck's really, really cool. Now, unfortunately, at the time of making this video, I do not have Dinkabui's first place Fire King deck, which I think is probably one of the best parts of the entire event. But as an avid Fire King player myself, and by analyzing his matchups as well as the picture he put online, I think I have a pretty decent grasp of the cards that he's playing, and I'll be able to explain why these cards are really powerful. Now, this isn't, of course, one for one what his deck was, but this is a lot of the cards that we're playing. We know that he was playing Pot of Extravagance. I have a really strong belief that he's playing 3 copies of Sacred King of the Fire King Garunix, and then it's a lot of standard cards on top of it. I think there's a few components that makes this deck really good. The first being that it can play under Molchummy Fraulelis really, really well. If you guys have been following me, you should know by now I am one of the biggest Fire King advocates, and have been playing pure Fire King since the banning of original Sinful Spoiled Senkais. There are some similarities between this deck profile and the strategy that I was playing, but overall, the biggest thing about this deck is that it can play around the Molchummies. It can be pretty good against destruction effects like Ryzeal Detonator, and if you're going against your Maliss matchup, the bestial monsters are one-sided, and if you're able to continuously destroy the board, your opponent will never be able to make one. It's really a shame that we didn't get a video on the real profile, but this deck is completely crazy. I want to know what are you guys' thoughts about YCS Birmingham, and what other strategies that you are excited to see the profile of. YCS Birmingham was strange for a few reasons. The presentation and broadcast is completely different from North America, and there's even some things that I think North America should take from Europe. And while the strategies may seem more diverse in Europe, I think it's more reflective on the culture and their approach on how Europeans are taking to the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. Pretty much what I'm saying is that I think these strategies could compete in the CCG too, but let me know down below in the comment section, what do you think about all of that? Until then, big dog, I can't wait to see you on another video, because I know you're going to click on one of these.